Hello, and welcome to Taking a Break with Bishop Norma. Come on in, take a seat, and let's get right to it. I want to be able to encourage you today. Want to be able to, I'm going to just talk about a message that I talked about on Sunday. It was our first service back in our building, and so it was really a blessing. And the service was anointed. The word that went forth was anointed. I actually brought forth a word talking about it's okay to be okay, and was able to afterwards. I actually sold about 40 t-shirts into people that were in attendance before we ran out, but I wanted to be a blessing. I always like to be a blessing. So what I do want to talk about this morning, I want to first quickly mention a few scriptures to you and encourage you today not to compare yourself, to be okay with being you. It is one of the most powerful things you'll ever be able to do, is to be okay with yourself. Even when you get on an airplane, for you that you know this on riding on airplanes, is as they're telling you some of the things to look out for, that they're getting ready to take off. One of the most important things they say to you, they say that in case of anything that goes wrong, in case the oxygen masks are going to fall. But it states that before you put an oxygen mask on a child or anyone else, make sure you put yours on first. And that's how I view being okay. That I have to be okay in order to be able to be a blessing to somebody else. That if I'm not okay, I can't help anybody else. So I make it a priority in my life that regardless of what's going on, regardless of any trials, tribulation, whatever going on in my life, because things happen to me just as well as they happen to you. But what I do is I make it my purpose to still be okay. I don't judge myself by what's going on in my life. I don't, so I have to make a determination that when things hit me, when things come against me, when things happen, I still have to be okay. And Paul put it in one of the best ways. Paul said to us, actually in the book of Philippians, the 4th chapter. I'll go there first. Was headed somewhere else, but first we'll look at Philippians. But what Paul tells us, he says that he had learned, and I talked to you about this before, but he tells us that he's learned to be content. He said that in any situation he's in, he learned to be content. It said it didn't matter if he was up or if he was down. It didn't matter what trials and tribulations he was going through. It didn't matter precisely. He put it this way. He said that not that I speak in regard to need, for I've learned that whatever state I'm in, I learn to be content. I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I learn both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. He said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And you see, that's important. That's important to know that what Paul was saying is that being okay is simply being content. And it doesn't mean that I don't want things to change. It doesn't mean I don't want better. It doesn't mean I'm not looking forward to something else. But it means that in order for me to function, in order for me to even get to the next, in order for me to even get better, in order for me to get more, in order for me to prosper, in order for me to reach my visions and my dreams, I have to be okay where I am. Because if I'm not content where I am, I'm not going to do the work. I'm not going to do what it takes to get me to the next level. So he said, I've got to be content. And so in being content, what I want to stress to you today is actually in 2 Corinthians 10:12. It says, for we do not dare class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves, but they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. I want to stress to you today that it's not wise to compare yourself to somebody else. It's not wise to set your standard by somebody else. It's not wise to want to be somebody else. He's saying that when you begin to allow others to set your standard, or others to tell you what you ought to be or what you ought to look like or how you ought to live your life, what he's saying is that you're comparing yourselves among yourselves. He said, you're setting your standard. You're limiting yourself when you compare yourself to somebody else, because you're saying, I just want to live up to them. I just want to get as far as they got. It means that you're limiting and you're shutting down what God has for you, because God said that I can do more. God said that He said, I can do increasingly more than you could ever ask or think. So if I only can allow myself to think according to where somebody else is at, I limit myself to what God has for me. That's why he said, don't compare yourself among yourself. He said that you got to allow me to set your standard. You got to allow me to tell you how far I want to take you in this life. That's why God said when he created us, he said that it is good. He said that it is good. He didn't say it was good when you lose those 10 pounds. He didn't say that it was good when you become like somebody else. He didn't say that it was good then when you reach the stature that someone else did. He said that when I created you, it was good right where it was, because I knew your beginning and I knew your end. He said, in other words, what I have for you is for you. So if I limit myself by what somebody else has, I can be missing out on what God has for me, because God said what he has for me is good. So he said, do not compare yourself among yourself. Don't limit yourself to somebody else. He said that this morning you ought to be encouraged. You ought to be, regardless of where you are, you ought to be able to just simply say, I'm okay with being me. I'm okay. I'm content right here, because right here, as long as I'm doing what God has told me to do, I'm going to reach what God has prepared for me. He said, and that's what it means to be empowered. That's what it means to be okay with being okay, is that I'm okay well, what God has called good. That God has already told me that he has more for me than I could ever ask or think. He said, so then therefore I can't limit myself by what somebody else has or what somebody else is or what somebody else is telling me to be. I have to go by what God is telling me. I have to go by what he is saying. And he said, don't compare yourself among yourself. Don't waste time in this day. Don't waste time in this day comparing yourself to somebody else. Don't waste time in this day not liking who you are. Don't waste time in this day. You got to be able to look in that mirror and say, I'm okay with me. You got to look in that mirror and say that regardless of what happens, I'm okay, because I know this is not my end. See, as long as you got a vision and you got dreams, and as long as you're serving a God as good as the God that we serve, you can know that you know what, this is not my end, because it doesn't look like what God showed me. So I know it's not. This is just where I am for right now in this moment. That's why also he tells us don't look back. He says don't look at the past, because that moment is over with. I've got to deal with where I am today. I want so badly to stress to people that it's simply okay to be okay. It's okay to be where you are. It's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be doing what you're doing, because God is saying that's what I need you to do. Because what I have you doing this day is what's going to get you to your destiny. So what all I have to do is make sure that in this day that I'm doing all that God had put in it for me to do. Is I'm doing all the things that he asked me to do in this day. And as long as I'm doing that, I know that I'll reach everything that God has for me. But it would be foolish and unwise for me to compare myself to somebody else. So again, in the words I'm going to always speak to you, as long as God puts it on my heart to do, it's okay to be okay.